and welcome to my channel. Today we're going to look at a layout design I did for a gentleman who was solely interested in running passenger trains. Let's have a look at the wish list. So I said he wanted to run passenger trains, he wanted to run 2 trains continuously, and he specifically wanted to run this WalthersProto 11 car consist. 11 cars times 85 feet is 935 feet in real life, which is 10.7 feet in scale, or about 3.3 meters. In the space he had available, this was not going to happen. So we settled at 7 cars, nice uneven number, a little bit more than half, which would lead in scale to 6.8 feet, or just over 2 meters in length. That was the train. Then he wanted a through station and a stub station, a wide open scenery, a lot of bridges and trestles, and a city scene. And that all had to be in a walk-in design. Let's have a look at the space he had available, which was not that much to accommodate all of this. He had 20.6 by 10.5 feet. So this is the house. So you see on the left we have a balcony that has to remain accessible. There's a sliding door here on the south. It does not have to be accessible on a daily basis, so a duck under or something will be fine. There's a window top left. What we do with that, he doesn't really care. There's a balustrade down here in the south, and we are not to build up on top of it or over it. Because he doesn't want from downstairs to be able to see the trains. And then there is a staircase just behind the balustrade that leads from left to right in an upward motion. So coming to the landing, there are a few doors, but I just drew the one that's most critical. It's right here, and that has to remain very easily accessible. So I just made this little pink area, a space that needs to remain free for him to easily walk from the stairs to the door. So what remains is actually quite a nice space. I noted that on the left corner we need to have some access. So moving forward with this. So this is the first design we came up with. The pink area has been extended, as you see here in the bottom, just to be able to reach the balcony. Just to explain something about the design philosophy, there is a through station, and to be able to go through it, you need a return loop from one end and on the other end, or you need to be able to run around and go through the station. So that's going to be the most critical dimension for these designs. So you see here's a return station, very roughly sketched in. Again, the yellow is the bench work. I keep a 60 centimeter maximum depth. This just gives a quick idea of what the room would look like. So you have one return loop on the right hand side, and you would have one return loop on the left hand side. As these are very long passenger trains, the wider the curves, the better. We settled on a 30-inch radius. That would be most feasible as a minimum. That's not a lot. Ideally, you would want somewhere in the 40 range, but then again, you can't have everything. This design is far from ideal. You're losing a lot of space, and the longer stretch is not even usable because you have to somehow get out of this return loop again. It's a bit of a confusing design as well. So let's just move on, and the other ones will make it more clear. This is design number 2. We removed the walkway to the balcony, and we created a duck under. That was perfectly acceptable by him. As said, it's only for emergencies that he has to be on the balcony, so there's no real need to keep all that space for a walkway. A through station will be on the longest side of the layout. That would make sense, because the through station has 2 yard throats, so it needs the most space. We kept the return loop in this corner as it seemed to fit quite naturally, and then the other return loop as far away as possible of the first return loop to get a long running. And then the substation could somehow fit and end in this return loop, because you have a massive surface area there where you can put a nice station scene, a little city scene as you wanted as well. And then the other return loop, I don't know, perhaps that could be some more scenic area. So this was promising, but we just kept on orientating. This is another design where we moved the return loop, one of the return loops, out of the corner and put it halfway. This did not lead to anything, because basically your distance from return loop 1 to return loop 2 is very short, and your through station has to be in between there, and there's just no room for that. So that was 3A. So variant 3B, we just moved the return loop into the corner, but then we didn't really solve the problem, because the distance between loop 1 and loop 2 is still very short. On the upside, there's a very long stretch on the north where you can put your stub station. or more than that, and it could possibly go around into the corner here. Looking at another variant, the idea was basically to have the biggest possible table in the middle of the room. So it's basically your 4x8, but on steroids. Very classical design. So you have one return loop one hand, another return loop on the other hand, and then what you often see is the station overcross. And then in the north, you would have plenty of space for a shelf where you could have some staging. You could also put your stub station there, but there's not that much room for scenery, so it would basically be a visible staging, I think. We both thought that in this design we lost a lot of space and runway with these aisles, because you got an aisle in the south and an aisle in the north. And on top of that, your train would still be diving from one return loop to the next. So then we went back to variant number 2, as we both thought this would be the most promising. So we worked that out a little bit more to see what can actually fit in the space. So the bottom layer would house the through station in the north, where you see it just immediately dives into a loop and then goes back and connects to the station itself. So that's one return loop, and then you have what appears to be double track, which basically ends up in another loop going to the other side of the layout. So here you could have one continuous running train. Switches where possible are number 8s. Okay, not this design, not yet. Actually, these are 6, but we're going to change them to number 8s because these are, again, long passenger trains. So we have to have a lot of spacing in between the tracks and as wide as possible turnouts to let it all run a bit smoothly. And you definitely got to watch out for your S-curves. So that's basically the distance between from one curve to the next curve, how much straight you have in between. There's a certain guideline on that to make it look a bit better and to prevent derailments. So then we have a switch here where we basically branch off and head towards the scenic section and the stub station. So the gradient would start around here. Let me put on the other track layer. And then we go up, up, up. We go underneath the track here, we go underneath the track here, behind the through station on the bottom floor, turn around, go over the station. I can just turn it on so you get an idea, but it's a bit messy, so just turn it off again. And then here we would have a switch where it would essentially become a double track mainline, and we would go here into the yard throat and into the stub station. This is not the exact track plan. It's just to see if everything would more or less fit. And we were quite happy with this. You see the aisle space is also quite sufficient. It's not exactly 36, it's maybe a bit less. So this seemed promising. So then we went to the next iteration where the track is a bit more permanent. We did decide on a double crossover with a slip made into it here, and then followed by 2 number 8 left-hand turns to create 4 tracks, and we basically have the same in reverse on the other side. And here is the appearance of a double main line going into the tunnel. And the initial idea was that the inner track would go to staging. So here it would immediately start descent and dive under. And then if I just turn the staging on, it would keep on descending, do a loop, and then you would have your tracks, and then turn around on itself, and then you would climb back up. But once I showed the client this design, it dawned on him that all this had to be made as well, and it was becoming an increasingly more complex project. So he actually didn't want any staging at all anymore and decided just to keep the trains on the track. Fair enough, it's his decision. So if we look at level 2, at the bottom you see we would come up. We would go underneath and take the center stage on the front. You want to have your lower tracks more towards the front of the layout and the higher tracks more towards the back. Dive behind here, dive behind the wall, keep on climbing all the way up, loop around itself again. This was more or less going to be the final track arrangement. Because this is a stub end design, we have here, it's not on here yet, a crossover. So to release the engine of the train, let it do a run around where it can connect to the back of the cars and proceed in the reverse direction. And this track here on the bottom is a passenger car track. Also, to do the switching for the passenger car and perhaps for the runaround locomotive, there will be a small switcher stationed here on this track as well. More operational possibilities were not really required, so we left it at that there will be one switcher here for the mail cars and possibly to help support with the runaround of the locomotive. One thing I forgot to mention is why we have this double main line here. Basically, the length is more than sufficient to house one train, so you can have a really nice scene where you have one train exiting the station and one train arriving at the station. As well, you could have one train parked at the crossing here and waiting for another train to cross over to the inner track and depart. So this is the final design. Let me just start before we look at the scenery with the track and the technicals. So let's look at the grades. Here we come off the lower loop and we would start the grade very gradually, as again these are long cars, so you want to do everything gradually. From here we start a 2% grade. It is 2% because we have to get over itself, let's say here at this point where at 2% we will be at 12 centimeters, and we can take it easy and go back to a 1% grade. It will be a 1% grade all the way around and to this point where we reach the end height of 27 centimeters. Here is a triple crossing again. If I turn on the bottom layer, you see a triple crossing, the same on the bottom left, bottom hand of the screen as well. We got 3 different heights. So here in the north we have a 0 centimeter for the bottom, 14 mentioned here, and then 27 centimeter would be the maximum height over there. You could increase or just continue the 2% grade and go higher, but this seemed to be more than enough to have a 10.5 inch height difference, or 27 centimeters overall. So the grade ends here. I said we go all the way around, and this is all at the same height of 27 centimeters. Having a look at the scenery, as you see, we cover up quite a lot of track work. Let's just have a walk around. Let's start here at the stub end. This is a big city scene where we have the stub terminal right here in the middle, and we have a half or 1/3 covered station, main station. There are some streets for city scene over here. This can be interpreted in many ways. I propose also to put here in the middle a bus terminal that would make for a great scene, buses arriving and people getting out. Here, it would be kind of an alleyway, or the back end of the buildings that can be a bit dingy, and a little path walking there and all kinds of stuff happening. So going below the station in, let's call it an urban canyon, or the 2 tracks, seems to be almost like a main line as we branch here, double track main line. So that would be a nice view. The outer radius is 30 inches as discussed, so it is a bit on the tight side, but that's all that we could do. Then going here, we have a crossover from scenery as we go from urban scenery, and then we get some greenlands, and then we get the last urban piece, this viaduct, and we go into the full greenery. Here we cut through the landscape a bit to conceal the tracks, as this is a very long visible run. And we got a 2-bridge water scene over here, where this track is the middle height track that then again crosses here over the lower track. So we have 1, 2, 3 heights all in more or less one scene. And then this track ducks into the tunnel here, and that one goes into the tunnel there. So it's quite a lot happening over here. The train, as we continue here from the stub end, now goes down into a 1% grade. Here we cross with a girder type bridge construction over the station. This is really good because it will give a sense of travel for the station down below, because we cut the tracks, we cut the visual length of it. And then we go to the right in the return loop, where you see I'm trying to model a mountain ridge. So we got a mountain ridge going in this direction and going out in this direction. So the train would come through here, go through a cutout, and then go here onto a embankment, and then dive into the mountain. And here in the middle would be a nice valley scene, not too many trees, a bit open, eventually going into the woodlands, and a little river going through it. small trestle here to let the water from the river out. Then at this point, the track spears into the tunnel, goes behind the back wall here. I drew it in this light blue color because it's still descending and has to go all the way down. And keeps on descending, actually, until we arrive back here and eventually here in the urban canyon where it joins with the lower loop. So that is quite a long run. As you remember, one of his requirements is to have 2 trains run continuously. Well, we can only realistically do 1 train on a bottom loop, and he can run the second train from the bottom loop all the way up through the scenes to the substation, which he was fine with because he just wants to run 1 train and have another second train running in the background to keep him some company. So going from the urban canyon, we disappear into a tunnel and come out here as a double track. The through station is designed a bit more as a suburban station. It is relatively large, but there's not a large city scene modeled. The suburban city scene would be on this back wall poster here. So it is there, but it's just not modeled. We do have a more rural residential street scene here, and that will be about that. So last but not least, let's just have a look at the space. We did not infiltrate the pink area as requested. We have access space in the top right and access space here in the bottom as well. The conundrum with this bottom space is, could you have access, you could make this wider, but if you make it wider, you don't have the access anymore. So basically you're stuck to more or less a design like this. You could fill in this corner piece here, do a bit more scenery. That is still on the table. We have a little bit of access here to pop up from the duck under and to go to the balcony. And there is not a full, but more or less full or wide enough aisle space here to go around. Keeping in mind also that this red-pink area is actually open space as well. So people can stand here, walk through, and then stand on the inside. So this design was finished a month and a half ago. I don't know if he started the layout yet or if this will be a summer project, but he's happy with it. I'm sure we're going to have to look at some details in the future, but as it goes with the design process, it's a very fluid thing and it's never really finished until the layout is built. If you want to see more videos just like this, don't forget to subscribe and like. If you have any comments or if you want to see a layout design done for you, just let me know and I can look into it. Thank you very much.